Morning. The record reflect we are back in session. You can see parties and counsel are present. All members of our jury or alternates are present. Our witness, Dr. Rubin, is back on the witness stand. And Mr. McGee, you may continue your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Trying to make sure where we left off. Now, Dr. Rudin, we ended yesterday. You were speaking about the issues you have with Mr. Licio's testimony. You ended with talking about the circles around the headlights and how there was error on how that was drawn out on the video for measurements in correlation to the model. Is that accurate?
Oh, correction. I have no issues with his testimony. It's just I disagree with certain points.
Is there any other issues that you have in Mr. Licio's testimony after that issue?
Then you're asking me if I disagree with certain points that he made?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe you can refresh my memory, which points I made, how many points I made.
You kind of three. You made the model with the evidence image. It was wrong. The overhang didn't match.
Wrong calibration, wrong external and probably internal calibration, yes.
And then you talked about he tried meteorology, but only measured one thing. It's kind of a note I made. Do you remember that aspect?
You mean 3 versus 2?
You did make that point eventually, yes, because there was 3 degrees of freedom versus 6 degrees of freedom, depending on how many matching points. You talked about that. And then you also talked about the circles put around the headlights instead of using points on the headlights, how that caused, you call it aerial error introduced.
Right, okay, that's the 3.
And those are the 3 that you talked about.
Right, so just to point back to the middle one, what I call 3 versus 2. So in the report that I've seen, in the presentation that I've seen, the identification, whatever, matching check was made only on front lights, and they were not combined with the third light that was conjectured by the expert. And the point I made, maybe I can make it more clear, that when you, in all model matching methods, whether it's in image processing, in meteorology, or anything like physics, if you have data on one end and you have a model on the other end, so what you try to do is to bring as much data into the model, because if you have too little data, anything can match. Your theory can confirm anything. So you have to use all of it, and then I gave another explanation, number of equations versus number of unknowns, and you want number of equations, unlike what they tell you in high school, have many more than number of unknowns. And that way you over-constrain the system, and only the right one will confirm. Because right one will confirm with infinite number of equations. It doesn't matter. It's all correct. So that was I never understood why this was not done. Never understood that. And another big point, which I'm not sure I brought up, is that that particular expert did not propose what I call validation experiment, live reprojection validation experiment, which is what I've been talking about and advocating on both sides for some time. I believe that's the main thing that should have been done, and I think should be done, because otherwise it's just a battle of computational models. All of them have some errors. I hope mine have less. And but in the end, experiment is it. And while it introduces its own issues, the way you do it, it's very difficult actually, unless you do it correctly, to maneuver the car. And I don't know if I talk about it, so I can explain what that experiment entails.
You did talk about that yesterday.
Okay, so that experiment is absolutely must, and I'm just dazzled that neither side is making it possible, and that was the main reason I came back sort of to that situation and tried to implore whichever side I can implore that's necessary, because without it, it's just theories and fight of theories. So.
And one thing we talked about yesterday was we're always talking about the lights on the front of the vehicle in the evidence video and the illumination in the rear of the vehicle and how they cross like the same area like a door frame at 7-Eleven. Remember that part of the conversation?
Yes.
And you actually, upon your own, tried to demonstrate a visualization of that. Is that accurate?
So basically, you asked me the question, what is the trajectory of a certain point? Trajectory being if you observe it over a period of frames, from frame to frame to frame, and then plot it in the image. That would be a trajectory of a point. If somebody walks from left to right, you take what he is or she is, and so on, and you would see a curve or something, or a straight line. So the question was, which trajectory is followed by latch number 1 and whatever you call latch number 2?
Yes.
And my conclusion is that they follow exactly the same trajectory.
And you could made visuals last night to demonstrate that, correct?
Yeah, I just experimentally derived it from the video.
And I'll show you, which is Exhibit 1151A. And you created this image, correct?
Yes.
And could you describe to the jury what this image shows?
So it would be more clear if you had a video.
We have the video too. I just want to show the image first, then go to the video so they know what to look for.
So this is one of the frames. That particular frame is from the surveillance video. This particular frame doesn't have anything on it. So what I did is this. As the vehicle appeared, well, we think it's a vehicle, right? We assume it's a vehicle. We don't know it's a vehicle. So that thing appears with the lights, and it basically has something that looks like front lights and the back light. So as it goes through, at some point, a flash point appears over here, what we just call a real light. Okay, we don't know what it is, but we call it the real light. So at that point, when that real light appeared, the front light, the passenger front light, was right here. And from that point on, I actually tracked that front light, a passenger front light, right upper corner, and that was the curve, this slightly below curve. So it propagates roughly straight light, and at the same time I tracked the whatever mystery light, and whatever, we don't know what it is, right? So I call it mystery light, and it turns out to be going to this trajectory, which almost coincide with the other trajectory, and roughly 1 pixel off. And that pixel, actually, that pixel is because you can click pixel up or pixel down when you track the light. So if I actually clicked exactly pixel up, they would completely coincide and you would not see it. So I clicked it slightly below. So you can see that they follow the same trajectory now over time. So now why is it significant? Well, it's significant for a following reason. If you were to look at the actual vehicle, that white truck vehicle.
We can go to the video you made so it can help you explain, I think, where you want to go. And we'll go to Exhibit 1151J, and this is a video you made as well, correct?
Right. So, well, it's a composition of things. So, very fast, slow down.
Let me see if I can open a different player, and then I'll have more control over it. And I can just, I can have a loop.
So yeah, so it's basically a loop, but if you were to slow it down, you will see that the white light appears, flashes out, and at that time, the front light in the corner would be right here, over here. And so they all lined up. But if you look at this vehicle, and assume that is manifestation of this vehicle, that this pattern comes from this vehicle, then you would see that, and you assume, again, you're making assumptions. You assume that front light is the front light, passenger front light of this vehicle, and the mystery light is what was called flash.
By Mr. Lithia, right?
Right, I think so. I don't remember, but I think I saw it there. And you make a straight line through two. It's pretty much horizontal line, okay? They're pretty much aligned, almost horizontally, actually. It's like this, it's an angle. But then it also covers another feature, which I am assuming is another latch. I've never seen the vehicle, but I'm assuming it's another latch. And then by the law of projection, the law of projection, the following is true, that the straight lines project into straight lines. So projection can do a lot of interesting stuff, like make things parallel, things non-parallel, change angles, change lengths. But it cannot bend lines. So which means that if this guy was going through that line, because this in the middle, okay, I'm sorry, I call it a guy, it's a feature. This feature, because it lines up with this, and they're on the same line, that means that this one had to necessarily go through that as well. So that's all. Even though we don't see it, but we know if this thing is that, which we don't know, that's pretty much what it is.
So since the one front latch is what you're saying in the middle of the vehicle,
Okay.
goes through the same plane as the rear latch,
Same line.
they should both react to whatever light source is making the one latch react. So there should be two flashes.
Objection calls for speculation and
Overruled.
assumes facts on evidence is the condition of the second latch.
Overruled.
Okay, now you ask me about flashing and all this, which is a different issue. Right now, I'm just addressing an issue. What is the trajectory? If we think, if we think that this object is this object, right? So this object moving here. What I'm saying simply that these two features will follow the same trajectory.
So
That's my main conclusion on this.
So if there's, let's just say, 2 points on this staple, one in and one end. So they're both going through that same projection. So if there's a light
Trajectory.
if there's anything going through, or if this is hitting some reflection or causing some reflection, it goes to some point. The other latch will go through the exact same point.
Up to synchronization of video frames, because frames are not exactly, they're 1/3. I'm assuming, I have never examined original DVR. I'm assuming it's 1/30th of a second or something like this. So I believe the video itself said 1/30th of a second. So things are never exactly in the same place, but close enough, right? So then they would be in the same geometrical situation, and therefore, yes, then if there's a light source hitting it in a certain way, then within the margin of the synchronization of frames, it would be hitting the same way up to that error.
Now, all this testimony up to this point has been about reprojection, right? Taking the evidence video and reprojecting some type of model or something over it to see if they match up.
Yes.
Did you also do a photogrammetry analysis of the white truck in the evidence video to see if they match up just by measurement?
Yes.
And that is something that you produced in a report on your own without either side's request, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a report. It's something that I call a white paper.
A white paper.
Yes.
And in that white paper, you described the process you went through. Is that accurate?
To some extent, yes.
And I have some exhibits that you shared with me that I think can help if you could explain to the jury the process you went through to get to a conclusion.
Okay.
I'll start with 1151B.
Not sure which way I should be.
I would face the
Probably
jury
turn to your right, that way you'll be facing the microphone.
and facing the jury, yes, so they can hear you better.
Yeah, that's probably a little better.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so little introduction. So up until now, what we were doing was we were looking at the model, and we were looking at the pattern in the image, and then we also were looking at the street from where it came, and we bundled it all together, and we computed something what we call least square error matching. In other words, what is the best way can we turn and twist that vehicle in that coordinate system of the street so that the best match occurs with respect to chosen matching points. Now that per se did not have any measurements in it. So with one exception, I believe for the hearing, I don't know if I can mention that, there was a measurement of the excuse me, wheelbase, because once we projected the vehicle onto the street, we could see where it, we thought we could see where it was touching the street, the pavement, and assuming that it was actually on the ground, not under and not above, we were able to measure one length, I believe, from that. Now here is an entirely different method. Okay, this is totally different. This is classical photogrammetry. Classical, not in the sense that this is an old method, but it's a variation on an old method that I came up with in 1995. And this is something I've been thinking for ever since that 402 hearing. I was thinking about what else is there that one can do. And what I figured out is that if one wants to make measurements on patterns, one is facing the following problem. Think of UFOs, right? Everybody's seen UFOs, not in real life, but on TV, right? And they're usually hovering somewhere, and there's a bunch of lights. And there's like this wild speculation. How big is it? How far is it? How high is it? And so on. And of course, there are all kinds of experts that will give you all kinds of explanations. So from classical photogrammetry point of view, if you only have one image and you have a bunch of lights, you can't say anything about it in terms of how far it is from the camera, how high it is above the ground, what's the distances between the points, if there are some features, how big are those features, or typically distances between points are what we care about. And it's because there's not information there to ground it, so to say, okay, to fix it in space. To understand that, actually, I have a picture. Like a cube. Do you have a red cube?
I do have that. That is 1151H.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. This is the best I could master at 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so what you're observing here is a camera, so it's a very, very simplified situation. So you have a camera somewhere over here, and the camera is observing some object, okay? And I should have drawn the picture. The object looks like a red cube. And the question is, where is this object with respect to the camera, if it's just one image? So if you were to close one eye and look at something and say, well, where is it? Well, it turns out that you can't possibly determine that, because the same shape object that is further away will appear to you or to the camera in exactly the same way as another object of the same shape closer. And the reason for that is that the only thing that camera uses to create an image are so-called ray tracing. So it takes basically rays, and it traces ray from the camera to each feature on the object, and then reproduces, that's what I could have drawn here, it reproduces an image over here. So this image would look like a little cube. But the truth is, it could have been something smaller closer or larger further. And we know this game that children play. They look through the window and there's a person and they do like kind of a pincher, right? So they pinch somebody. That's kind of the situation, right? So that prospectively something further away becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, but when you measure things, when you were to measure, let's assume that this is a ground level. Okay, that this is the ground level. So if you're observing this, and I should have drawn a picture here, if you were observing this, this could have been a cube sitting just above the ground level, on the ground, or it could have been of this size, or it could have been a larger cube sitting under the ground, okay? And you don't know which. And when you look at it, you don't know. So if you assume it's here, then if you assume it's on the ground and you were to measure it, you actually would get a shorter measurement. If you assume that it's further in, you need to know how much further in it is, then you would get actually larger measurements. Okay, so back to this. So to conclude from that is that a single image has some 3D information, but that 3D information is all kind of encoded in this bundle of rays, right? So that is the only three-dimensional information that image has that is taken by the camera. If you so-called calibrate the camera, then for each pixel or whatever, each feature on the image, you can derive ray trace in a real three-dimensional space. Okay, so this is what I call 2.5D. So it's not fully 3D, but it's not exactly 2D because it's not just flat. It's flat with this little bunch of rays. Okay, and then about 25 years ago, I realized that while everybody else was doing stereophotogrammetry, when you look with two cameras, and the situation changes completely. When you have two cameras, you can resolve everything actually. But in surveillance, we don't have that. We would have just a one surveillance camera, just like that. And so how do you determine somebody's height? And this is when I realized that by exploiting this bundle of rays with some little bit extra information, these few measurements, we can actually measure somebody's height. Okay? We can measure somebody's height, and I won't go in detail how you do it. But so So then now I extended it to another problem, which is rather than measuring dimensions of the vehicle, I'm actually verifying whether a certain appearance of the vehicle can match some known model. So you pull a model and say, is it this, is it this, is it this? And I actually reduced it to sort of measuring heights. So let me show you how I do it.
So we were at B, do we go to that, or we go back to, or we move on to C, which is
Yeah. The actual. That's the thing. No, that's not the thing. That's later.
so you were back at this one?
Okay, so what this depicts actually is, there's no photogrammetry here per se, other than we simply go to the model, and I should say that when you have a model, which is actually a set of three-dimensional points, what we call a three-dimensional cloud, you can actually click at any point, and with some mathematics, you can figure out how high it is from the ground. Okay, in this particular scan, this scan was much better than the one I originally had. There was some ground already included, but if there is no ground, you can actually try to extract it by looking at the wheels and extrapolating to there. So what you're seeing here are some measurements. So it's a little bit choppy, but it's the same numbers over here. It's just for the demonstration. So we click on the light. This is real light in that truck. That is, from my understanding, is the scan of the white truck, right?
Correct.
So okay, and so we clicked on that particular point, which is the quarter point of the passenger size light, and we measured the distance to the ground, which was whatever it turns out to be, 322.22. I will make some comment how they can fluctuate actually. 322. So then we click on this other latch, right? We were told that there is a latch, okay? So we know there is a latch. We check, because we want to know if that thing could have been latched, right? So we go to that latch and we click and we get another measurement, which turns out to be 3.53, slightly higher than this. Interesting. And which we did it many, many times, and that comes pretty much plus minus 1 inch like that. And then we also took driver's side light. You can't see it here because the truck is not turned. And we measured its left, I believe, left corner. Okay, and that came out to be you can't see it here. I think it's 3.12, slightly different height actually than this. And again, we tried it many times, and it's for some reason it's like 1 inch off. Okay, that could be just a model, points, the way laser is collecting data and so on. Okay, and then we picked another point, which was the point which we conjecture was something below the light, which was right below the light, straight down. Okay, which on the bumper. We conjecture it's on the bumper. Okay. All right. And in fact, I believe that the reason we did that is because in the report they were using that point as well. Okay. So those are just heights. Oh. And while we were at it, we said, okay, we know the heights of these guys. What is the distance between them? Okay. And by the way, think of each of this stick as a person, and each of those things is like height. Okay. So we basically are saying, like, what we know that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 persons. What we assume in our model is 4 persons, and their distance is given by, again, model. There's a simple formula that computes distance. Once you get points, you get distances. Okay. So we're assuming that we're observing a scene that has 4 points. 1, 2, 3, whatever, 3, 4. Those are the only ones we picked, and we could have picked more. And let's go to the next slide. Okay. No, that's not it. Keep on going, please. Could you give me another one with the truck? No. Let's first bad truck.
I'll go back to.
Okay,
You can
one
see
more.
which
It has to be a night scene. Show me the night with measurements.
With the truck, this is,
Okay.
that's that one.
No, there's another one. It's missing now.
These are the ones you sent me. Light truck, new box, night.
Okay, give me the day. Okay, that's okay. It's okay.
This one?
Yeah. Okay.
C? So 1151C.
Yeah, that's good. No. There's another one. I'm sorry. There's one with the same heights. Because I'm looking at the numbers.
Look at the file name, because that tells you the one.
I don't know. I mean, this is
Right below, that's how you get
complicated.
it.
Let's just go one by one. I'll tell you which one. Okay? Could you flash this one?
Okay, this is F.
No good. Because it's a different height. 517. Can you give me this one?
G.
No.
E.
Okay, give me this one. Yeah, good. Okay, that's good enough. Okay. So what is here? So what is here is actual calculation. So for all of those, for each of those points, which I call a person, right? For each of those points, I actually found this physical location on the day scene. And what I mean by physical location, I already knew its height, right? I knew its height from the truck. I conjectured its height. Then I went and I found where it would be if it was that. Because I just a minute ago I told you, you can figure out where it is. It turns out you can if you know its height. Because all you have to do, you have a ray, okay, coming down. And you have to slide your stick along this ray, and when it hits the ground, that's where it is. That's where it has to be. It has only one way to be on the ground. By the way, that relates to a car on the ground hypothesis. This is how I was able to ground it to the floor. When before I was explaining yesterday that there were some situations when the vehicle ends up under the ground. This guarantees that each of those points come from something on the ground. So as I slide it down, it's simply like it goes down, it hits something. That's it. That's where it is. Okay. That's if we assume that truck lights corresponded to those pattern, what I call pattern, right? So I basically did it for each of those points, and this is the rear point ended up over here. The passenger light point ended up basically here. And this is actual XY location, not just Z. Z we knew what Z was because we conjectured what Z is, but XY we didn't know. And so on for each of them. And then you say, okay, but how do we know? Okay, fine. So, and then I measure distances. What do? And this is the same in basically turnaround, right? Those fronts are actually physically, this is a driveway from that scene where they captured travel or whatever that pattern was. By the way, this is a pothole. I think that's the name, right? Pothole. And we have a few of those, and that's why I actually asked. It's a very old scan, apparently, from, I don't know, 15 or 16. I'm not sure. We only started using it in January of 2019. But it's a very old one, you can see, and it's kind of rough. So I actually asked for the new scan. I learned that there was a new scan from the other expert testimony, but I was not given it. And I really needed it because I needed to verify my calculations to see if it correlates with a better scan. Because the rougher is the scan, the larger could be the error. So I asked for that, I never received it. Okay. So now we have distances that we measured by this sliding procedure, right? So I kind of reversed things from, instead of measuring somebody's height again, I said, I know the height of this guy. Where is he standing? This is the problem I solved. Well, once I solved this problem, here's this important concept. If that vehicle was really what was captured over here. If it was that, then all the distances between these points, what we call rigid constraints, have to be exactly the same as in that vehicle. If we go back into the vehicle, I actually measured those corresponding distances in the vehicle. Because it has no chance to do anything else. It's a rigid object, and it goes in a rigid way. So it cannot shape shift. Okay? So all the pairwise distances between corresponding points should be preserved. Now that's a beautiful principle. I wish I thought about it before, okay? It took me another 14 years to figure out, 25 years to figure it out. So, but I did. And so now, why is it useful? Because now I can say, okay, so if that was that particular model, because of the rigid constraints, so things, because it's a rigid thing, it cannot change, it cannot shapeshift, then these distances should be exactly the same, or up to the error of the model. And I already alluded that there is an error in the model, right? The scan itself gives you an error. By the way, there is no reprojection error, this least square thing that I talked about. It's not present here because I trace each point individually. So in that way, it's much more precise method than the other one that I used before. Okay. So now, if we actually look back for a second, let's just keep in mind one distance. So it's a front light to that mystery light. And what does it say? It says 14 point. I can't read it myself. 14.9 or something. I have it in the table. I believe it's something like 4.4.
If you had your reviewing your report, would you be able to refresh your memory of that difference? I believe it's page 6.
915. 14.915. Okay.
And that's the distance from the
That's the distance
rear light to the front passenger light top corner, correct?
Yeah,
That's in feet, correct?
that's in feet, yes. Yeah. And meters is my native language.
Be pretty long if it was in meters.
So it's 14.9. Okay, let's go and look at what it was in the model.
And is that
The first thing is what you should. Okay, cool. So it's this, right?
yes?
And what is it? What does it say? It says 16. I have to realize. Okay, no, that's this guy. That's this guy. Is it 16.05? Let me look at the table. 16.05. Yes. So we can write it down. It's 16.05 versus 14.915. So in just differences, then whatever you can subtract, but in percents, it's 7.6% disparity between two. But there's another way to measure disparity. Is I can actually go into this model, this image, and measure how many pixels this guy is. Okay, how many pixels, and then see what that difference means in pixels. And the difference in pixels was actually 11 pixels. Now in photogrammetry, that's big. Because if this was a reprojection method, okay, it's not a reprojection method per se, but if this was a reprojection method, 11 pixels is huge. So 7.6% on the lateral length is fairly significant, okay? But then we repeated it for each one of these 3 points. And then we even measured the one across, okay? And you will say, why does it matter? I mean, what is significance? Nobody would actually measure the distance between the upper left, whatever, corner to the upper, whatever, internal corner, because people think more in terms of the whole thing. But it doesn't matter. I mean, for my rigid constraint method, as long as the points are defined, this thing has to be preserved. Because again, the vehicle cannot shapeshift. It's not an amoeba of some kind. that can change. It's not transformable object. It's a rigid object, right? Vehicle, unless it gets smashed or something.
Okay, so Dr. Rubin, so you did that for all the different points.
Correct.
Did you compile all those into a table to show all the points and how they relate?
Correct.
And then you actually labeled all the different points that you measured from point to point so we can get a nice visual of how it all works together, correct?
Yes.
And I believe that's 11.11.5.2. Which I'll project now. Does that figure actually show how the measurements work and how they relate to one another?
Yeah. So to understand this table, to understand this table, so there's a column and a row, right? So over here, going down are the actual measurement of the model for AB, AD, BD. So AB, AC, AD, and BD. Okay. So the actuals are here, and on the top row are the measurements that I derived from my method, which I call HPP method, which stands for height preserving projection. And why is it called height preserving projection? Because I preserve the height. I preserve the height, and from the height I compute x and y position, and then I do my constraint, rigid constraint. And then in the table for each entry, right? For each corresponding entry, AB in the model and AB in the computation, I compute the disparity. What's the difference in percents and in pixels? Perhaps I could have done it in feet as well, but you can do calculation, right, yourself. Maybe we can add that. Okay. And so what you look at this model is that actually there's a negative error in one. In other words, usually all of these entries, the lengths were actually shrunk. So what we measured was shrunk with respect to what it should have been. But one of them, the across line, for some reason expanded. So again, it's a shape shifted. So it shape shifted itself, trying to say, well, I mean, if it was really me, this guy is saying, if it was me, you would have 0.000 here, or maybe 0.0, maybe 1%. Let's say up to like this magic 5%, okay, 6%, whatever it is. But I mean, they're hitting there. So they're not hitting so much that it's 20 or 30%, but it went on the other side from this 5-6%. Okay, and if you look at the number of pixels despite, it's actually very significant. I'm not sure. Okay, did I explain it?
Well, let's see if I'm understanding it correctly. So you're saying keep an eye on the sheet here. So the distance on the model of the truck from A to B related to the distance from the rear reflector point to that same point if that's a vehicle in the video, they don't match. The one model is longer.
For three of them, longer.
Correct. But I'm talking
For
from
one
A
of
to
them,
B.
shorter.
But the length from A to B is longer.
Yes.
Correct. From A to C on the model is longer than what's in the video.
Yes.
And A to D is also longer than what's in the video.
Yes.
So the model of the truck appears to be longer than what vehicle is inside the video.
No, you can't say that.
Well, the measurements are all long.
No, yeah, I have to correct you, I'm sorry. What it says is this, you have to understand it properly. If this was that, these numbers would not give you anything like this. Okay? So what we observe here, we can't say that there is a vehicle such that it will have these dimensions. All it says is that to accommodate these heights and this pattern, the shape shifted. Okay?
Yes.
It's a shape shift. It's not natural shape shift. It doesn't mean that the real car is this. I'm not claiming that. All I'm saying is that they should have matched. They didn't. And you were basically asking me if the real dimensions are this. I don't know what the real dimensions are. This method doesn't tell you that.
But it's telling you that they don't match in that dimension, they're all too long.
Yeah, all of these constraints should have been, this should have been ideally, it should be 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay, that's what it should be.
But
Or close to that.
the three of them measured from the back are longer, but
Yeah.
the one wider
Yeah,
is shorter. So it's
Yeah.
the opposite
Yeah.
direction.
yeah, and I don't know why. I have no explanation. It has something to do with what is the real shape? What is the true one? I don't know. We don't have actually a method, that's going back to my principle. We don't have a method to look at a bunch of lights and see and say, what is it? Because the problem is physically not well defined. You don't have enough information. I showed it to you with the cube,
Yeah.
okay? If that's true with the cube, it's true with every point and every dimensions between every 2 points and so on. So the only method we have is a search method, kind of a Google, okay? It's a Google thing. We go and we Google these things, and if somebody gives us thousands of models, then we can like quickly go through that and find possibly the right one that doesn't give you shapeshift. That's the hope.
From this, looking at this analysis, can you make a determination of whether or not, based on this examination analysis, whether or not it appears consistent that the white truck is the truck in the video?
Not consistent. With one reservation, up to the error in the model, and I'm not satisfied. I'm not satisfied with the quality of this ground model, and it's very important because when you measure the distance where the pin drops, if it goes down and it drops, but what if the floor is not well defined? If there is a little pothole or something, and we try to eliminate that, but a good laser today should not be doing that. That's why I asked for this data, and I was not given this data.
So with the data you have, you're saying it's not consistent. The data
I have is not consistent, correct.
don't have anything further.
You're finished with your direct?
Yes.
We'll take our morning recess this time, 15 minutes. Keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case. We'll see everyone back in about 15 minutes.